But the Al Golden press conference is being held live right now. And we'll have some more on that coming up here in a bit. But Jacob, again, host of Chatterbox Bengals, of course, you and Craig. But just right now, again, there was some recent news right now as the coaching staff continuing to fill out on the defensive side of the ball along with Al Golden.
Yeah, obviously the major news of the Bengals offseason so far, hiring Al Golden to be the next defensive coordinator, taking over for Lou Anarumo, coming over from Notre Dame after their national championship run. And it seems like the rest of the Bengals defensive staff is starting to fill out. It was rumored basically minutes, if not hours, after Al Golden's hiring that Jerry Montgomery would be the next defensive line coach, run game coordinator, and that has come true. The Bengals officially announced the hiring of him. And then their next linebackers coach will be Mike Hodges, the old linebackers coach in New Orleans, the Saints' old linebackers coach. And he brought that unit to levels that they hadn't been at before with the same players, basically. I know a lot of Ohio State fans will remember Pete Warner from his days at Ohio State. He came in to the league as a rotational guy, not even an every down linebacker. He was a fringe Pro Bowl player this year with Hodges as his linebackers coach. So really good at maximizing the talent he has in the room, and I think that's the biggest thing we can focus on for the Bengals as we move through this offseason. The other two rumors coming out, nothing official from the Bengals yet, but it seems like the safeties and cornerbacks coach, Jordan Kovacs and Chuck Burks from last year, will be retained and be the secondary coaches this year as well for the Bengals. So seems like Al Golden, if he doesn't have his staff done yet, it's at least really, really close, and we'll be able to look at that more full picture as we move into draft season. This is important to get all this stuff done now, obviously, because we're moving into Senior Bowl and East-West Shrine and stuff like that for these marquee draft prospects coming up over the next month or so. And you need coaches in place, especially at a team that doesn't have deep scouting departments. You need position coaches in place to go scout these guys, find who's good to attack in the draft. First round we talk about a lot, but especially in those mid-rounds, that's where these coaches make their money, is finding guys in the mid-rounds that other teams don't necessarily know about that can come be star players. So it's important to fill these positions now, even more important for the Bengals, and it seems like they're trending in that direction.
You guys watch these teams. I mean, you look at this Super Bowl right now, and again, this is why I was a slight defense of Anarumo, although I said, hey, he needed to go, and I don't want to get back into that, whether they should let him go or not. But I think the bottom line is, no matter whether it's Al Golden, Lou Anarumo, whether it's Spagnuolo, it doesn't matter who the defensive coordinator is. You look at these two teams that are in the Super Bowl, and you look at the mammoths that they have on that defensive line. You look at the playmakers they have in the secondary, and you look at the dogs that they have at linebacker, and you look at all the weapons that they have on defense. We could talk about Al Golden until we're blue in the face. We could talk about, Lou Anarumo and his scheme and this, that. It doesn't matter unless this roster really fills out. So we could talk about the coaching staff filling out and this, that, the other. I think Al Golden's going to do a good job. There's really nothing out there to say that we shouldn't have faith in his ability to go lead this defense. But what is that defense going to be? You look at this, we don't need to get into a debate about who they need to add and all this, but I think we can all agree. You look at these defenses in the Super Bowl, you look at the defenses that were in last year's Super Bowl. Like, I know we say this Bengals defense doesn't need to be elite, it just needs to be average because of the offensive, output from Joe Burrow and company. But man, oh man, the gap that still exists between the Bengals defense now and the two teams in the Super Bowl, it's a good thing they got Al Golden, but they have a lot of work to do, and it can't just be all in the draft. They have some work to do as far as pieces that they need to add to bulk this up to somewhat replicate what we're seeing from these two teams that have made it to the Super Bowl this year and even last year when you look at the two teams.
No, you're right. I think the only reason Bengals fans rely on that middle-of-the-pack conversation talking point is because we've seen it twice. They got to the AFC Championship with a 15th-ranked defense, and they got to the Super Bowl with a 16th-ranked defense. Now, if you look at every non-Bengals statistic, you need a better defense than that to win a Super Bowl. But I think just the fact that we've had two successful seasons in the recent history of the Cincinnati Bengals franchise, and both of those came with mid-level defenses, we've all unanimously talked ourselves into that being what we need because we've seen it before. Now, would I like a top 10 defense? Absolutely. And if Joe Burrow had a top 10 defense, I couldn't even tell you the stuff I'd be saying because the confidence I would have in that team to win a Super Bowl would be through the roof. So hopefully Al Golden can get there. Hopefully the front office will give him the funds he needs and the player personnel decisions that he needs. That's a talking point we had on Chatterbox Bengals right when we went live after they hired Al Golden, was making a hiring like this late in the or this early in the offseason, this big of a change with Lou Anarumo, who's been there for so long. How much player personnel control do you give Al Golden and his new staff right off the rip? We know the defense is the biggest position of need, side of the ball of need. There's a lot of positions of need on that side of the ball, but how much say do you give to your first-year defensive coordinator, a first-time NFL DC, to draft the guys that he wants in the room, the guys that he wants on his defense? And I just don't know how that'll work. I think it definitely helps him in the sense that the Bengals don't have a scouting department or anything along those lines where they have to rely on their coaches. But I think most of the time with first-year coaches, you kind of dial back the amount of say they'll have. But with how much change we need in our defense, I hope the Bengals give Al Golden the controls to get what he believes he needs. Otherwise, they shouldn't have hired him if they don't believe he can do that.
The other part, too, is and this is no knock on Lou Anarumo, but at some point, if it's not working, you just need to change it. And for the past 2 years, it objectively did not work with Lou Anarumo. We have higher expectations than that. We just did a whole segment on, can Joe Burrow win the Super Bowl? Should Joe Burrow be, number 2 behind Mahomes as favorite to win the Super Bowl in terms of active quarterbacks? And the answer, of course, I believe to be is yes. To have that, you need to have a competent defense. The defense has not been competent for 2 years. It's time to move on from Lou Anarumo. And if Al Golden is able to improve the defense even slightly, this is a playoff team. This is a playoff team, and once the Bengals get to the playoffs, I truly believe there is no other franchise that is capable of dropping 50 on us and blowing us out by 30. That just doesn't – the Bengals, when they get to the playoffs, they're a competitive football team, and they're scary.
No, and that's fair. And I guess my point was I wasn't defending the Anarumo thing at all. I guess my point was we make it about Anarumo, we're making it about Al Golden, but when you look at the two teams that are here, I think you could take Spagnuolo and let him lead this defense for the Bengals, and I don't know how – I think he probably gets a little more because I think he's a good DC. I just don't know how much more even the best DCs in football can get out of the unit that they just threw out there the last 2 years. I think that while they needed to make a change – there needs to be a lot more change and point of emphasis on the talent that's being brought in on the defensive side. And not saying that they're not going to. I think that's going to be a point of emphasis, but that's just the point being made just based on the teams we see here. I will say, though, you look at the offense for the Chiefs. That offense, as good as it is, it's not as explosive as the Bengals to overcome defensive deficiencies. If the Chiefs didn't have as elite defense as they had this year, would they be able to overcome the Chiefs' offense, which is not nearly as good and explosive as it has been in years past? And you look at the Eagles. I mean, I know you have A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith, you have Saquon Barkley, and you obviously have Jalen Hurts. But if that defense isn't as elite as it is that offense explosive enough from a passing standpoint to overcome defensive deficiencies? It's not. To your guys' point, yes, we saw this Bengals offense overcome defensive deficiencies to the point where they had so many opportunities to win close games, like the 2 against the Ravens, obviously the loss against the Chargers, and so many other tough the Steelers, this, that, and the other. So obviously the draft important, free agency important, but we'll have more on this Al Golden, media release coming up here. If there's anything that pops out, I know we'll have more on tomorrow's show regarding that. But closing thoughts on the Bengals in regards to that.
No, I think next year there's going to be a lot of pressure on the Cincinnati Bengals, probably more than they've had ever in the history of the franchise. Joe Burrow, in today's NFL, having that quarterback is the key to a championship. You have the key. You just got to get the box, and right now there's nowhere near a good enough defense to have a box that you can open up with Joe Burrow. It's a disaster. Fix the defense, and I think this is a Super Bowl contender again. That's all it takes. Now, I don't know how they're going to be able to do it. They have to pay Jamar Chase. They have to pay T. Higgins. They got to pay so many players while also somehow maintaining a defense that last year looked completely lost. And they're not going to be able to pay for a lot of defensive players. Jay Morrison came on our show last week and said they're not going to make a big splash. They probably won't. I'll phrase. They probably won't make a big splash defensively. So with that, you got to trust your coaching staff to help these guys develop into a way that we haven't seen with Lou Anarumo. It has to be Al Golden has to be better than what Lou was. And to be quite honest, based on what I saw last year, it's pretty hard to be worse. So Al Golden, yeah, I'm excited for next season. Make an emphasis on winning in the first 3 weeks of the year, and you're a playoff team with an improved defense.
Yeah, I think that was the main focal point of hiring Al Golden, was that we knew, or at least the organization knew, they weren't going to go out and make one of those big swings. So you go get a guy who's known for his development and getting guys to where you hope they're going to be, and you put a lot of stock in the guys you already have in your building. And I think that's what the Bengals are doing, and I think all of us are just kind of unanimously hoping that they're right.